The grand meeting hall of the Stellar Council sparkled with its usual glory. Thousands of crystals hung from the ceiling, casting rainbow patterns across the worried faces of the gathered representatives. But today, the beautiful lights couldn't hide the fear in the room. Elder Gray stood at the center platform, his silver robes reflecting the light. His thin, tall frame trembled slightly as he watched the latest hologram recording. The images showed another world falling to the swarm, the third this month. "We have lost contact with Colony World 7, he announced, his voice echoing through the silent chamber. The swarm consumed the entire planet in less than 3 days. Whispers of terror spread through the gathered council members. Representatives from 50 different species sat in their floating chairs, arranged in perfect circles around the central platform. Most of them had evolved on peaceful worlds, developing their cultures without the need for conflict or violence. "How is this possible?" asked Representative Blue, her crystalline form shimmering with distress. "Our shield technology is the most advanced in known space. Nothing should be able to break through." Elder Gray gestured with his long fingers, and the hologram changed to show the swarm's attack pattern. Millions of small black creatures moved like a living cloud, adapting and changing their form to counter every defense they encountered. "The swarm learns," he explained. "Each time we deploy a new weapon or shield, they analyze it and find a way around it. Our technology—" He paused, looking down at his hands. "Our technology is failing us." The council chamber erupted in chaos. For 300 years, the Stellar Council had maintained peace through their advanced technology. They had solved all their problems with clever machines and elegant solutions. Violence was considered primitive, a sign of lesser evolution. In the midst of the panic, a quiet voice spoke up. "There might be one option we haven't considered." All eyes turned to Representative Green, one of the youngest council members. He worked in the history department, studying species that hadn't yet joined the council. "Speak, young one," Elder Gray encouraged, grateful for any suggestion. "There's a species we've been avoiding," Green said, standing up. His chair floated forward. "They live on what we classify as a death world, a planet that should be too dangerous for intelligent life to develop." The chamber grew quiet. Everyone knew about death worlds, planets with extreme gravity, dangerous predators, or harsh weather. Most species that evolved on such worlds died out or destroyed themselves. "These creatures," Green continued, bringing up a new hologram. "They're called humans." The image showed a planet called Earth. The council members watched in horror as scenes from human history played out. Their wars, their sports, their survival against natural disasters. "They're violent," shouted one representative. "Look at their primitive weapons," said another. "They fight each other for fun," exclaimed a third. Elder Gray raised his hand for silence. "Continue, Representative Green. Why do you suggest these humans?" "Because they're survivors," Green explained. "Their planet tried to kill them with everything from massive predators to deadly diseases. Their own bodies are built for endurance and recovery. They can break bones and heal. They eat poison for pleasure. They invented thousands of ways to fight before they even reached space." The council chamber filled with mutters of disgust, but Elder Gray kept watching the hologram. He saw humans running through harsh deserts, climbing frozen mountains, diving into deep oceans. And most importantly, Green added, "They're unpredictable. The swarm adapts to patterns, to logical responses. Humans don't follow patterns. They do things that make no sense, take risks that seem insane, and somehow survive." Elder Gray stood silent for a long moment. The swarm had already destroyed 7 worlds. At this rate, the entire council would fall within a year. "Representative Green," he finally said, "prepare a first contact team. If the swarm is our nightmare, perhaps we need monsters of our own to fight it." As the council members left the chamber, the hologram continued playing. On the screen, a human smiled while eating something called a ghost pepper, its face red with pain but somehow still laughing. They had no way of knowing that this decision would change the fate of the entire galaxy. Captain James Stone watched the red dust of Mars swirl outside his mining station's window. Another boring day of checking equipment and filing reports, he thought. 6 years since humans had set up their first Mars mining operation, and the excitement had worn off months ago. He sipped his coffee, grimacing at the taste. Even with all their advances in space travel, no one had figured out how to make decent coffee on Mars. The station's alarm suddenly broke the silence. "Unknown ship approaching," the computer announced. "Design matches no known human vessel." Stone nearly spilled his coffee. "First contact. Here, on a mining station." "Show me," he ordered. The window turned into a screen, displaying a sleek silver ship that looked more like flowing water than metal. It was beautiful in a way that made human ships look like children's building blocks. The ship landed with perfect grace on the red Martian soil. Stone grabbed his emergency kit, standard procedure for unknown situations. He smiled, remembering how the training instructor had told them to hope for friendly aliens, but be ready for anything. A door appeared in the smooth side of the alien ship, simply melting into existence. 2 figures stepped out, wearing what looked like robes made of light. They moved with careful, deliberate steps, struggling slightly with Mars' gravity despite it being lower than Earth's. Stone waited at the airlock. Protocol said to let them make the first move. The aliens approached slowly, and one held up a small device. A bubble of air formed around them. "They can make portable atmospheres," Stone muttered. "Well, that's fancy." The aliens reached the airlock, and Stone got his first good look at them. They were tall, thin, with silvery skin and large eyes. One wore robes that seemed to change color with each movement. "Captain James Stone," the taller alien said in perfect English. "I am Ambassador Reed of the Stellar Council. We apologize for arriving without warning, but our need is urgent." Stone blinked in surprise. "You speak English?" "We learned your languages from your broadcasts," Reed explained. "May we come inside? What we have to discuss is complicated." 10 minutes later, they sat in Stone's office. He'd offered them coffee, but they'd politely declined after scanning it with their devices. "Let me get this straight," Stone said, leaning back in his chair. "You represent an alliance of 50 advanced species. You've got ships that can bend space, weapons that can destroy stars, and technology that looks like magic to us." "Correct," Reed nodded. "And you're losing a war against some sort of space bugs that eat planets." "The swarm, yes." Reed's companion shuddered at the mention. "And now you want our help." Stone couldn't keep the amusement from his voice. "A bunch of primitive Deathworlders who haven't even colonized their own solar system properly." Ambassador Reed's large eyes blinked slowly. "You find this funny, Captain?" "A bit, yeah." Stone grinned. "You've been avoiding us because we're too violent and primitive, but now that you're in trouble, suddenly those same traits look pretty good." "We offer Earth full membership in the Stellar Council," Reed said stiffly. "Access to all our technology, trade routes, knowledge." Stone held up his hand. "You don't need to bribe us, Ambassador. We'll help." Both aliens looked startled. "Just like that. Just like that." Stone stood up and walked to the window, looking at the alien ship. "Humans have a long history of fighting against overwhelming odds, sometimes because we have to, sometimes because we're too stubborn to give up. But we also have a history of helping others do the same." He turned back to them. "Besides, if these swarm things are eating planets, they'll get to Earth eventually. Better to fight them now, with allies, than wait until they're on our doorstep." Ambassador Reed stood as well, moving with that same careful grace. "The Council said humans were unpredictable. They did not mention you could also be wise." "Oh, we're definitely unpredictable," Stone laughed. "In fact, I already have some ideas that will probably horrify your council. But first, you're going to try real coffee from my personal stash. If we're going to fight together, you should start getting used to human customs." As he prepared the coffee, Stone smiled to himself. Finally, something more exciting than filing mining reports. The universe had no idea what it was in for, letting humans off their leash. And somewhere in distant space, the swarm continued to grow, unaware that their perfect record against the Stellar Council was about to meet humanity's talent for impossible victories. The training room aboard the Stellar Council's main military station looked like something from a sci-fi movie. Floating platforms, energy shields, and high-tech combat drones filled the massive space. But right now, all that fancy equipment sat unused in the corners. Mark, the demolitions expert from Earth's Special Forces, stood in the center of the room with a simple wooden stick. Around him, 30 alien soldiers lay on the ground, groaning. "Get up," he said, not unkindly. "In real combat, you don't get to rest just because you're tired." Captain Stone watched from the observation deck with Ambassador Reed and several council military leaders. It had been 2 weeks since the first group of human trainers arrived. "This is barbaric," one of the council commanders said, his light-patterned skin flickering with distress. "They're using primitive weapons, making them run and fight until they collapse. This is how you build strength and instinct," Stone explained patiently. He pointed to another area where Lisa, the combat specialist, was teaching hand-to-hand fighting. "Your soldiers rely too much on technology. What happens when it fails?" "Our technology doesn't fail," the commander insisted. "The swarm made it fail," Stone reminded him. "That's why we're here." In the training area, Mark was demonstrating the simple defensive move. The alien soldiers watched with a mixture of fear and fascination as he showed them how to use an opponent's strength against them. "Your bodies are capable of more than you think," Mark told them. "You've just never been pushed to find out how much more." In another section, Alan, the tactical officer, had set up a surprising training tool, a chessboard. He was teaching a group of council strategists about unpredictable decision-making. "You're all brilliant," Alan said, moving a piece, "but you think too logically. The swarm beats you because it can calculate every logical move. Sometimes, the best strategy is to make a bad move on purpose." "That makes no sense," one of the alien strategists protested. "Exactly," Alan grinned. "That's why it works." Back in the main training area, Lisa was now running an exercise that made the council observers gasp in horror. She had teams of alien soldiers carrying heavy loads, crawling through obstacle courses, while Mark fired harmless but startling noisemakers at them. "Stop," one of the council commanders shouted through the speaker. "You'll hurt them." Stone switched off the speaker. "They won't get hurt. Well, maybe some bruises, but they need to learn." "Learn what?" Ambassador Reed asked quietly. He had been watching everything with growing interest. "To fight through fear," Stone explained. "To keep going when everything hurts. To trust their bodies and instincts as much as their technology." Down below, something remarkable was happening. One of the alien soldiers who had been struggling all week finally managed to complete Lisa's obstacle course. His teammates cheered, something they would never have done before training with humans. "Did you see that?" Lisa called out to her group. "He didn't give up. That's what we're teaching you. Not just fighting, but determination." Mark gathered his group, all of them tired but standing taller than before. "You know what humans call this feeling. The burn of tired muscles, the sweat, the exhaustion. We call it getting stronger." The aliens looked at their own bodies with new understanding. One of them, braver than the rest, asked, "Is this how you survived on your death world?" "Partly," Mark smiled. "But mostly we survived because we're too stubborn to die. That's what we're really teaching you. Stubbornness." In the observation deck, Ambassador Reed turned to Stone. "I think I understand now. We've spent centuries trying to rise above our physical nature. You've spent centuries learning to use yours better." Stone nodded. "The swarm expects you to fight like machines. Predictable, logical, dependent on technology. We're teaching your people to fight like living beings. Adaptable, unpredictable, using everything they have." Down in the training room, Lisa was now showing her group how to use simple tools as weapons. The council commanders winced, but they didn't try to stop it this time. Tomorrow, Stone announced, we start teaching them to shoot old-fashioned projectile weapons. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. The council commanders looked horrified, but Ambassador Reed just nodded. The swarm was coming, and these primitive lessons might be their only hope for survival. The bridge of the council warship Starlight was silent except for the soft hum of machines. Captain Stone stood next to the ship's commander, watching the swirling black mass on the main screen. The swarm had just appeared in this system, heading toward a council colony world. They're exactly like you described, Stone muttered, studying the enemy. Millions of small black shapes moved together like a dark cloud, changing patterns as they flew. Ready for our surprise? The council commander nodded nervously. Their ship led a fleet of 20 vessels, all upgraded with what the council called primitive human additions: regular guns, explosive weapons, simple but effective tools. All ships report ready, Hallen announced from his tactical station. The council had given him control of battle planning, though some still doubted his illogical strategies. The swarm has noticed us, Lisa reported from her sensor station. They're changing course, coming right at us. Stone smiled. In the 3 months since humans joined the fight, they'd study recordings of every swarm attack. The enemy always did the same thing: analyze their opponent's technology, adapt to it, then overwhelm it. Remember your training, Stone spoke to the crew. Don't think like machines. Think like survivors. The swarm approached, spreading out in their usual attack pattern. They expected the council ships to form a defensive circle and put up energy shields. That's what the council always did. Instead, Stone gave the order: scatter formation, just like we practiced. The council ships broke apart, flying in seemingly random directions. The swarm paused, their perfect formation wavering for the first time. They're confused, Lisa grinned. They can't predict our pattern because there isn't one. Phase 2, Stone commanded. Mark, show them your toys. In the weapons room, Mark had replaced many of the ship's energy weapons with what he called good old-fashioned explosives. As the swarm tried to adapt to the ship's chaotic movement, Mark launched his surprise. Simple rockets shot out from the council ships, carrying special packages. The swarm didn't even try to dodge. They were used to energy weapons they could absorb or deflect. Close your eyes, Stone warned. The explosions were bright enough to light up space. But these weren't normal explosives. They were filled with the primitive mix Mark had created. Metals, chemicals, and materials the swarm had never encountered because they were too simple, too basic to be considered weapons by advanced races. Through the flashes, Stone saw chunks of the swarm breaking apart. Their perfect formation shattered as simple chemistry did what advanced energy weapons couldn't. They're trying to adapt, Lisa called out. But they can't analyze the weapons fast enough. There are too many different materials. Phase 3, Stone ordered. Lisa, bring us in close. Alan, signal the fleet. The council ships drove straight into the confused swarm, something that would have been suicide before. But now they had simple metal armor covering their hulls, too basic for the swarm to process quickly. Fire everything, Stone commanded. Don't give them time to think. A mix of energy weapons, explosives, and even simple metal projectiles tore through the swarm. The enemy tried to adapt, but humans had learned long ago that sometimes the best strategy was simply to hit the enemy with everything at once. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, the swarm was scattered, broken pieces floating in space. The council ships had damage, but nothing serious. On the bridge, the council commander stared at Stone in amazement. How did you know this would work? Stone looked at the tactical display, showing their victory. Because we fought like humans, not machines. We used chaos, unpredictability, and simple solutions. The swarm expects patterns they can analyze. We gave them confusion they couldn't process. And the primitive weapons. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Stone grinned. The swarm evolved to fight advanced technology. They never expected anyone to throw rocks at them. Really fast, explosive rocks. As the fleet regrouped, Stone received messages from other ships. The Council crews were celebrating, their fear replaced by newfound confidence. They had finally seen that they could fight back, could win. "Send word to the Council," Stone ordered. "Tell them we know how to beat the swarm now. And tell Earth we need more primitive weapons and crazy ideas." The stars twinkled in the viewport, and somewhere out there, the rest of the swarm was about to learn why humans had survived their death world. They never played by the rules nature set for them. Lisa sat in the Council's vast library, surrounded by floating screens showing ancient records. After their first victory against the swarm, she had started digging into the Council's history, looking for any information that might help them win the war completely. "Find anything interesting?" Mark asked, bringing her a cup of coffee. He had just finished installing new weapons on another fleet of Council ships. "Too interesting," Lisa replied, her eyes never leaving the screens. "Something about the swarm doesn't make sense. Look at this." She pulled up an image showing ancient star maps. The swarm first appeared 50 years ago, right? But according to these old charts, the systems they came from were empty. Completely empty. No life, no civilization, nothing. So, Mark sat down, careful not to touch any of the delicate library equipment. Maybe they came from somewhere else. That's just it. Lisa stood up and started pacing, something she did when solving puzzles. "I've checked every record. The swarm didn't come from anywhere. They just appeared, like someone turned them on." Captain Stone and Alan walked into the library then, followed by Ambassador Reed. They had been planning the next defense strategy. "Turned them on?" Stone asked, catching the last part of the conversation. "What do you mean?" Lisa gestured at her research. "I think I know why our primitive weapons work so well against the swarm. They're not a natural species at all. They're machines. Very, very advanced machines." The room went quiet. Ambassador Reed floated forward, his robes shimmering with concern. "That's impossible. Our scans show they're biological." "Are they?" Lisa pulled up more images. "Look at their pattern of attack. It's perfect, mathematical. And look at how they learn. They don't evolve, they upgrade. Like a computer program." Ellen moved closer to the screens, his tactical mind working. "That would explain why they can adapt so quickly to Council technology. They're designed to counter it." "Exactly." Lisa pointed to another screen showing ancient ruins. "I found records of an ancient civilization that disappeared millions of years ago. They were incredibly advanced, maybe even more than the Council, and they were paranoid about being attacked." "You think they created the swarm?" Stone asked, beginning to understand. "As a weapon," Lisa nodded. "A perfect defense system that could adapt to any attack. But something went wrong. Maybe the civilization died out. Maybe they lost control. Either way, the swarm went dormant. Until 50 years ago," Mark added. "What woke them up?" Ambassador Reed's color changed slightly, a sign of embarrassment in his species. "That was when the Council started expanding into those sectors. We were searching for new civilizations to join us. And your ships woke up an ancient weapon." Stone finished. "A weapon specifically designed to counter advanced technology. That's why our primitive methods work. They weren't programmed to handle them." Lisa nodded excitedly. "The swarm is a computer program with one goal: eliminate advanced civilizations that might be a threat. But it doesn't recognize humans as advanced because we still use simple tools and unpredictable tactics." Ellen started laughing. "So all our advanced allies have been trying to fight a computer virus with better computers, while we're basically throwing rocks at its screen." "This is terrible news," Ambassador Reed said softly. "If the swarm is that old, that advanced, No, Stone interrupted. This is great news. Now we know what we're fighting. Not some unstoppable force of nature, but a machine. And machines can be broken. Lisa pulled up one final screen. There's more. The ancient civilization built in fail-safes, ways to shut down their weapon if needed. The information is incomplete, but we might be able to figure it out. Stone finished. He turned to Ambassador Reed. Tell the council what we found, and tell them to stop trying to outthink the swarm. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. As the others left to spread the news, Lisa stayed behind, still studying the ancient records. The swarm had been designed to protect against the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. Its creators never imagined it would be defeated by creatures who still remembered how to fight with sticks and stones. Somewhere in the distance, alarm bells began to ring. Another swarm attack was beginning. But this time, they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to end this war, once and for all. Alan sat in the council's main science lab, surrounded by the brightest minds from 50 different species. Holographic displays filled the air around them, showing complex patterns of the swarm's behavior. He hadn't slept in 2 days, but coffee, now a precious resource among council scientists, kept him going. There, he pointed at a pattern that appeared every time human ships engaged the swarm. See how their formation breaks down. It's not just our weapons causing that. The chief council scientist, a being of pure energy contained in a special suit, moved closer to the display. Explain. When human ships get close, the swarm's coordination drops by 47%. Alan said, pulling up more data. At first, we thought it was just our chaotic tactics confusing them. But look at these brain scans. The display changed to show images of human and council brains during battle. The council brains showed clear, organized patterns. The human brains looked like fireworks displays. Your brains work like computers, organized, logical, Alan explained. But human brains, we're messy, random, emotional. And that randomness creates a kind of noise that disrupts the swarm's network. Captain Stone walked in with Lisa and Mark. They had just returned from another successful battle against a smaller swarm group. Any progress? Stone asked. Alan grinned. Big progress. Remember how Lisa found out the swarm was an ancient weapon? Well, they operate like a computer network. All the individual units are connected, sharing information instantly. Like a hive mind, Lisa added, looking at the displays. Exactly. But human brainwaves create interference in that network. It's like trying to listen to a radio station while someone's running a blender next to it. Mark laughed. So we're not just confusing them with primitive weapons, our brains are actually giving them a headache. Better than that, Alan said, standing up. I think we can use this. If we could amplify human brainwave patterns and broadcast them, we could disrupt their entire network. Stone finished, catching on quickly. The council scientists' energy form flickered with concern. But to generate a signal strong enough to affect the entire swarm, we would need to get very close to their main cluster, Alan nodded. And we'd need a lot of humans there, all thinking as chaotically as possible. The room went quiet. Getting close to the main swarm cluster was practically suicide. They had found its location, but it was massive, bigger than a planet. I'll do it, Mark said suddenly. Get me close enough, and I'll think about every explosion I've ever made. That should scramble their signals. Count me in, Lisa added. I've got some pretty chaotic memories from my fighting days. Stone looked at his team with pride. This was why humans had survived their death world. They never backed down from a challenge, no matter how dangerous. We'll need volunteers, he said. People willing to risk everything. Already have them. Alan pointed to another screen showing a message from Earth. Word got out about our plan. We've got thousands of volunteers, soldiers, fighters, athletes, people who know how to think fast and crazy in dangerous situations. The council scientists' form brightened, their equivalent of excitement. We can build devices to amplify your brainwave patterns, but the humans inside will experience significant discomfort. Pain, you mean? Stone said bluntly. How many amplifiers can you make? Enough for 100 humans. Stone nodded. That'll do. Get started. And I want our best ships equipped with both the amplifiers and our primitive weapons. We'll hit them with everything. Mental noise and physical chaos. As the council scientists rushed to work, Stone turned to his team. This is going to be dangerous. Maybe impossible. Anyone want to back out? Lisa, Mark, and Alan just stared at him. They'd come too far to quit now. Right then, Stone smiled. Alan, keep working on the patterns. Lisa, start selecting volunteers. Mark. Yeah, boss. Start thinking about the biggest explosion you've ever seen. We're going to need all the chaos we can get. The lab hummed with activity as humans and aliens worked together, preparing for their most daring plan yet. The swarm had been designed to counter logic and technology. Now it was about to face something its creators had never considered: the pure, wonderful chaos of the human mind. The fleet of council ships approached the massive swarm cluster, their hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. Inside each ship, human volunteers sat in special chambers connected to the brainwave amplifiers. Captain Stone looked at his team's readings from the bridge of the lead ship. How are you all holding up? He asked through the comm system. Ready to give these bugs a headache, Mark replied from his chamber. The amplifier was already making him sweat, but he grinned through the pain. All brain pattern amplifiers at full power, Lisa reported from her station. She had insisted on monitoring the systems, even while connected to an amplifier herself. Ellen's voice came through next, strained but determined. Swarm patterns showing first signs of disruption. They can sense something's wrong. The massive black cloud of the swarm moved toward them, larger than anything they'd faced before. This was their main cluster, the heart of the ancient weapon that had terrorized the galaxy. All ships, battle positions, Stone commanded. Remember the plan. Get us as close as you can. The council commander beside him watched in amazement as the human volunteers' brain patterns appeared on the main screen. Wild, chaotic spikes of mental energy being broadcast directly at the swarm. Energy levels rising in human chambers, a council technician reported. They're in pain, but their brain activity is getting stronger. Stone nodded grimly. They had known this would hurt. But pain was something humans understood, something they could fight through. Swarm approaching firing range, Lisa announced. Their formation is already breaking down. Our minds are affecting them. The black cloud of the swarm rippled like water in a storm. Individual units began moving randomly, their perfect coordination disrupted by the chaos of human thought patterns. Now, Stone ordered, all ships release the physical countermeasures. Mark had outdone himself with the weapons. Missiles filled with simple chemicals, electromagnetic pulses mixed with basic explosives, even clouds of metal particles. Everything designed to be too basic for the swarm to process quickly. They're trying to adapt, Ellen reported, his voice tight with effort. But they can't handle both disruptions at once. Physical and mental chaos overwhelming their systems. The swarm's massive form began to break apart. Millions of individual units moved in random directions, their hive-mind connection shattered by the combined assault of human chaos. But victory wouldn't come easy. The strain on the human volunteers was enormous. One by one, people began passing out from the mental effort. We need more power, Lisa gasped. The central cluster is still holding together. Stone looked at his team's medical readings. They were all in pain, their minds pushed to the limit. But they weren't giving up. Everyone, he called to all the human volunteers. Think about home. Think about Earth. Think about everything crazy and chaotic and wonderful about being human. Give them everything you've got. The response was immediate. Brain patterns spiked across all ships as humans thought about storms and sunshine, love and war, triumph, and failure, all the chaotic experiences that made them who they were. The swarm's central cluster couldn't handle the assault. Its perfect patterns shattered completely, broken by the very chaos it had been programmed to eliminate. The main cluster is collapsing. Lisa shouted. Their control network is failing. Across space, the mighty swarm, the ancient weapon that had terrified the galaxy, broke apart into harmless pieces of dead metal and organic matter. The council ships erupted in celebration, but Stone rushed to check on his team. They were exhausted, some unconscious, but alive. They had pushed themselves to the limit, just as humans always did when facing impossible odds. Hours later, as medical teams treated the volunteers, Ambassador Reed found Stone watching the cleanup from the observation deck. The council was wrong about humans, Reed said quietly. We thought your violent nature, your chaos, made you dangerous. We never understood that those same traits could save us all. Stone smiled tiredly. That's the thing about coming from a death world. You learn that survival isn't just about being the strongest or most advanced. Sometimes it's about being stubborn enough to keep fighting, crazy enough to try the impossible, and chaotic enough to surprise even yourself. As debris from the defeated swarm floated past the window, Stone thought about how far they'd come. Humans had arrived in space thinking they were behind everyone else, only to find that their greatest weaknesses were actually their greatest strengths. The council would never be the same. They had learned that true civilization wasn't about abandoning your primitive nature, but about understanding how to use everything you are, both the advanced and the primitive, the logical and the chaotic. And somewhere back on Earth, children were already asking their parents if they could volunteer to join the Council's new defense force. After all, humanity had found its place in the galaxy as the crazy, stubborn, wonderful protectors of civilization. The last hope had turned out to be the best hope all along.